The room was charged with anticipation, an almost tangible tension hanging in the air as reporters, staffers, and attendees gathered for what promised to be a high-profile debate on protest rights. Marjorie Taylor Greene stood at one end of the dais, her posture rigid, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room with calculated focus. She was prepared to challenge anyone who dared question her strict stance on public demonstrations. Confident in her arguments about law, order, and civic responsibility. Across from her, Jasmine Crockett entered calmly, exuding quiet confidence. Her measured steps and composed demeanor immediately shifted the atmosphere. People instinctively leaned forward, sensing that the debate would not only be spirited, but also intellectually charged. The moderator opened with a neutral question. How do we balance public safety with the right to protest? Greene spoke first, emphasizing concern for communities disrupted by demonstrations that could escalate into property damage or violence. She shared recent examples of protests that had caused disruptions, highlighting the strain on law enforcement and the local economy. Greene's tone was firm, authoritative, and direct, presenting her argument in a way that appealed to citizens who prioritized order and safety over unrestricted expression. She painted a picture of chaos that could arise without clear legal limits, stressing that regulations exist to protect the public and maintain societal stability. Jasmine listened attentively, nodding occasionally, allowing Greene to finish without interruption. When it was her turn, Jasmine's response was calm, deliberate, and precise. She framed the debate in terms of rights, responsibilities, and broader social impact, immediately capturing the audience's attention. Protest is not inherently disruptive, she began, her voice steady but compelling. It is a constitutional right that allows citizens to express their opinions, demand accountability, and participate in shaping society. Public safety is essential, but it must be balanced with the preservation of fundamental freedoms. Her words created a momentary pause in the room. The audience shifted in their seats, intrigued by her clarity and confidence, rather than directly confronting Greene. Jasmine asked pointed, thought-provoking questions that challenged underlying assumptions. How is unruly behavior defined? Who decides when public safety outweighs free speech? Can regulations exist without infringing on the rights of citizens? Each question was carefully chosen to highlight complexities, inviting attendees to reflect critically rather than react emotionally. Greene, usually quick to dominate debates, subtly adjusted her posture, clearly caught off guard by Jasmine's strategic approach. The session was no longer a simple back and forth. It had become a nuanced exploration of civic principles and societal priorities. Jasmine seamlessly bridged theory with practical examples. She recounted historical moments when protest had been crucial for social change, civil rights marches, suffrage movements, and demonstrations advocating for labor reforms. These examples illustrated that protest, even when disruptive, has historically been a catalyst for progress. By situating her argument within a broader historical context, Jasmine reframed the debate from a question of inconvenience to one of civic necessity. The audience began to see the issue in a new light. It was not about lawlessness, but about how society responds to citizens exercising their rights responsibly. Greene countered by highlighting recent incidents where protests had caused significant disruptions. She described scenarios where local businesses suffered losses, emergency services were stretched thin, and communities felt unsafe. Jasmine acknowledged these concerns, validating the importance of safety without diminishing the value of protest. She made it clear that recognizing potential risks does not justify undermining constitutional rights. This approach prevented the debate from devolving into confrontation, maintaining a respectful tone while keeping the discussion substantive. The tension in the room evolved into a dynamic exchange of ideas. Jasmine emphasized that regulations and freedoms do not have to be mutually exclusive. Both can coexist when approached thoughtfully. She suggested that reasonable guidelines could protect public safety while still allowing citizens to voice grievances. Greene nodded, seemingly reconsidering whether overly restrictive policies might unintentionally stifle legitimate expression. The audience, witnessing this nuanced back and forth, began to engage with the complexity rather than choosing sides impulsively to make her points relatable. Jasmine used analogies grounded in everyday life. She compared protest to a town hall meeting. Voices may be loud, opinions may clash, but each participant is exercising a legitimate form of civic engagement. Order and expression are not opposing forces. Rather, they are complementary when guided by thoughtful rules and mutual respect. This analogy helped the audience visualize the balance she advocated, moving the debate from abstract principles to practical understanding. Jasmine also addressed the audience directly, subtly inviting them to consider their own role in civic engagement. She highlighted the responsibility of citizens to interpret laws thoughtfully, participate actively, and respect differing viewpoints. Her approach encouraged critical thinking and reflection, creating a collaborative rather than adversarial environment. The focus shifted from who would win the debate to how individuals could navigate the tension between safety and freedom in everyday life. By the end of Part 1, the room was no longer filled with anticipation or tension. It was charged with curiosity, reflection, and engagement. Greene had presented the concerns of safety and order, while Jasmine had reframed the discussion around rights, responsibility, and historical context. The spark had been lit, a debate that promised not just contention, but insight, understanding, and a thoughtful exploration of protest rights in modern society. The audience was ready to move deeper into the discussion, where facts, perspectives, and emotions would intertwine to create a complete picture of this vital civic issue. Jasmine had not only positioned herself as a formidable debater, but also as a guide for the audience, showing that even contentious issues can be explored with reason, clarity, and empathy. The first part concluded with a subtle cliffhanger. The foundational arguments were established, but the deeper implications, legal, social, and emotional, were yet to be fully examined, promising a fast-paced, insightful continuation in the next segment as the discussion progressed. Jasmine Crockett shifted the debate from broad principles to concrete facts, ensuring that the audience could follow the argument logically while remaining engaged. She began by highlighting historical and legal precedents that defined the right to protest. She explained that the Constitution guarantees citizens the ability to assemble peacefully, and that this right has been crucial in shaping American society. Jasmine cited landmark cases, emphasizing how courts consistently upheld the importance of allowing citizens to voice grievances publicly, even when such expressions challenged authority or made the public uncomfortable. This foundation established that protest is more than an act of defiance. It is a cornerstone of democratic engagement. Marjorie Taylor Greene countered by raising contemporary concerns. She referenced recent events where protests had disrupted daily life, caused property damage, or required heavy law enforcement presence. Greene argued that these incidents justify stricter rules and regulations, framing them as necessary to maintain order. She spoke passionately, stressing that, without oversight, protests can cross the line from civic engagement into chaos, affecting ordinary citizens who are not involved in political disputes. Her examples were vivid, painting a picture of neighborhoods disrupted and communities strained. Reinforcing her argument for protective legislation, Jasmine acknowledged Greene's concerns, showing that she understood the importance of safety and order. However, she quickly reframed the issue. Disruption does not equal illegitimacy. She explained that while some protests may become loud or inconvenient, that inconvenience is often a reflection of the urgency and importance of the message. She reminded the audience that historically, major social changes from civil rights, victories to labor reforms arose from public demonstrations that challenged the status quo. By presenting this historical context, Jasmine emphasized that regulating protest to rigidly risks silencing critical voices and delaying progress. To make the discussion relatable, Jasmine drew on practical examples. She asked the audience to consider small-scale protests they might witness in their own town: students advocating for climate change policies, residents demanding safer streets, or communities highlighting public health concerns. She explained that these actions, while occasionally disruptive, serve to draw attention to issues that might otherwise be ignored. This approach grounded the abstract debate in everyday experiences, allowing listeners to empathize with both a protester's goals and the community's concerns. The conversation then explored differing perspectives. Jasmine encouraged the audience to consider why some people fear protest while others embrace it. For citizens prioritizing safety, the potential for disorder is threatening. For those advocating for rights, limiting expression feels oppressive. By framing the discussion in terms of perspectives rather than right versus wrong, Jasmine created space for nuanced understanding. Greene's points about safety resonated with part of the audience, while Jasmine's emphasis on constitutional rights and social justice spoke to another segment. This dual approach allowed listeners to see merit on both sides. Rather than polarizing them into opposing camps, Jasmine also addressed the social dimension of protests. She emphasized that protests often represent marginalized voices that may lack other channels for influence. By ignoring or suppressing these voices, society risks deepening inequality and eroding trust in institutions. Greene, while focused on safety, recognized the validity of including citizens in dialogue, but questioned how to ensure balance without creating risk. Jasmine proposed that clear guidelines designated areas for demonstrations, and coordinated communication with local authorities could protect public safety while honoring citizens' rights. This solution-oriented approach moved the debate beyond argument into practical application. Furthermore, Jasmine tackled common misconceptions. She highlighted that not all protests escalate into violence and that media coverage often amplifies rare disruptive events, creating a skewed perception of risk. She encouraged critical evaluation of information and cautioned against generalizations that can lead to overly restrictive policies. By combining fact, context, and perspective, Jasmine helped the audience differentiate between perception and reality, emphasizing that informed decision-making is key to navigating contentious issues. To reinforce her points, Jasmine used an analogy. Protests are like a conversation between citizens and their government. Sometimes loud, sometimes messy, but always necessary for feedback and progress. She explained that just as citizens accept discomfort in other democratic processes, like heated town hall meetings or legislative debates, they must also accept that public demonstration is a legitimate form of dialogue. Greene listened intently, occasionally nodding, as Jasmine methodically connected historical precedent, contemporary examples, and practical solutions into a coherent framework. The pace of the discussion quickened as both women engaged in sharp but respectful exchanges. Jasmine summarized that safety and freedom are not mutually exclusive. The challenge lies in designing systems that respect both. She emphasized that legislation should protect citizens without unnecessarily curtailing rights, and that communities benefit when voices are heard, even if they occasionally disrupt comfort zones. Greene responded by reiterating her focus on minimizing risk, showing that she was beginning to consider a more balanced approach. Though her stance on regulation remained firm by the end of Part 2, the debate had shifted from abstract arguments to tangible considerations. Facts, historical context, practical examples, and differing perspectives had all been examined. Jasmine's calm, structured reasoning highlighted the importance of understanding both sides, allowing the audience to appreciate the complexity of the issue. Protest rights were no longer a simplistic topic of order versus chaos. They were a nuanced discussion of safety, freedom, responsibility, and social impact. The room hummed with engagement, attendees now clearly invested in the conversation. Part 2 concluded with a sense of anticipation for the next phase, the emotional layer, where personal stories, societal impacts, and human empathy would intertwine with the facts and perspectives already discussed. The stage was set for Jasmine to not just argue for rights, but to illuminate why protecting them matters deeply for real people and communities across the country. The debate moved into its most compelling phase as Jasmine Crockett shifted the conversation from facts and precedent to the human dimension of protest. She understood that law and order alone could not capture the full picture. The emotional impact on real people, communities, and society at large needed to be addressed. Jasmine began by sharing stories of individuals whose voices had historically been ignored, whose only recourse to influence public policy had been public demonstration. She highlighted the courage required to step into streets, face public scrutiny, and demand justice. Each story painted protests not as acts of chaos, but as expressions of urgency, necessity, and deep moral conviction. The audience listened intently. Recognizing the humanity behind the abstract legal principles, Marjorie Taylor Greene responded with examples of ordinary citizens, disrupted by demonstrations, residents blocked from going about daily routines, business owners facing financial losses, and emergency responders stretched to the limit. She argued that these experiences create fear and anxiety, highlighting the need for regulations that protect everyday life. Greene's points were emotionally resonant as she framed the debate in terms of tangible consequences rather than abstract rights. The room felt the weight of her perspective, but Jasmine did not dismiss it. Instead, she integrated Greene's concerns into her argument, showing that empathy could be extended to both protesters and those affected by protest. Jasmine emphasized that empathy alone does not resolve conflict, but it can guide fair solutions. She asked the audience to imagine what it feels like to protest against systemic injustice, knowing that voicing concerns may result in confrontation or criticism. She contrasted that with the discomfort felt by communities affected by demonstrations. Her point was clear. Understanding both sides is essential for responsible civic engagement. She framed the debate not as opposition, but as dialogue between conflicting needs, urging listeners to consider both the rights of citizens to be heard and the responsibilities they hold toward public safety, to make the emotional layer tangible. Jasmine used relatable examples. She described a mother peacefully protesting for safer schools, a young activist advocating for environmental reform, and communities rallying for healthcare access. These individuals may disrupt traffic or make noise, but their actions aim to protect or improve society. Jasmine juxtaposed these stories with Greene's examples of community disruption, showing that the tension between protest and order is not a question of right versus wrong, it is a question of balance. By illustrating human stakes, Jasmine made the debate personal, inviting the audience to feel the complexity rather than merely analyze it intellectually. Jasmine also addressed the emotional consequences of suppressing protest. She highlighted that limiting public expression can lead to frustration, alienation, and mistrust in institutions. Communities that feel unheard may escalate their actions or disengage entirely from civic life. By ignoring these emotional and social dimensions, policymakers risk creating long-term harm that outweighs the immediate disruptions they aim to prevent. Greene's position, focused on immediate order, was now being reframed as one piece of a larger societal puzzle. The audience began to see that the debate was not about victory or defeat, but about responsible governance that balances rights, safety, and social cohesion. The conversation expanded to the role of perception and media influence. Jasmine pointed out that media coverage often amplifies extreme incidents, portraying protests as universally disruptive while ignoring peaceful demonstrations with meaningful outcomes. This distortion affects public sentiment, shaping fear and mistrust. She encouraged critical evaluation of information, urging the audience to differentiate between isolated incidents and broader patterns. Greene acknowledged this point subtly, suggesting that perception does influence policy, though she remained cautious about relaxing regulations too. Much Jasmine then connected the emotional discussion back to civic responsibility. She explained that protesters bear a duty to act responsibly, while communities and authorities share the duty to respect constitutional rights. By framing it this way, Jasmine emphasized that emotional awareness must translate into practical action. Both sides have responsibilities. Protesters must consider safety and order, while communities must accommodate dissent. This approach turned the debate from abstract argument into a roadmap for coexistence, offering concrete guidance on how emotional understanding informs policy decisions. As Part 3 continued, Jasmine skillfully integrated empathy, personal stories, and societal impact into her narrative. Her voice remained calm yet compelling, allowing the audience to absorb the nuances. Greene's arguments, though still present, were reframed through the lens of balance, citizens' rights. Public safety and social empathy are interconnected, and one cannot be prioritized at the expense of the others without consequence. By the end of this segment, the emotional stakes were clear. Protests are not mere disruptions, they are expressions of civic engagement with real human implications for all involved. The room's energy shifted from intellectual curiosity to reflective engagement. Audience members were no longer just listening to a debate. They were considering the lived experiences behind each argument, empathizing with both protesters and affected communities. Jasmine's methodical integration of emotion with fact and perspective had elevated the discussion to a level of maturity and insight rarely seen in public debates. Part 3 concluded with the audience deeply engaged, emotionally invested, and aware of the human dimension of the debate. Jasmine's narrative had made clear that protecting protest rights is not a matter of abstract principle alone. It is a societal responsibility requiring empathy, balance, and careful thought. The stage was now set for Part 4, where the debate would move toward resolution, synthesis, and actionable insight, demonstrating how thoughtful dialogue can reconcile even the most contentious issues in a meaningful way. As the debate entered its final phase, the atmosphere in the room had shifted from tension and curiosity to attentive focus. Both sides had presented strong points. Marjorie Taylor Greene had highlighted the tangible consequences of protest, emphasizing community, safety, and order, while Jasmine Crockett had illuminated the constitutional rights, historical significance, and human dimension of civic demonstrations. Part 4 would not be about dominance or rebuttal alone. It would be about synthesis, reflection, and practical insight. Jasmine began by summarizing the key points of the discussion in a calm, methodical tone that commanded attention without aggression. She first acknowledged Greene's concerns. Jasmine emphasized that public safety is an essential consideration in any society, and that communities affected by protests have legitimate experiences and feelings that deserve recognition. She stressed that policy cannot ignore these realities, and that balancing rights with safety is a nuanced task requiring thoughtful dialogue between citizens, law enforcement, and lawmakers. By validating Greene's perspective, Jasmine created a foundation of respect, ensuring that the audience understood she was not dismissing the opposing view, but rather seeking common ground. Jasmine then reframed the conversation around responsibility, emphasizing that rights come with obligations. Protesters must act responsibly, follow legal guidelines, and consider the impact of their actions on public spaces and community life. She highlighted examples of successful protests that achieved their goals while minimizing disruption. illustrating that civic engagement and safety can coexist. The audience could see how individual accountability and structural safeguards are complementary, not contradictory. By presenting concrete examples, Jasmine moved the debate from theoretical principle into actionable insight. Greene, listening intently, acknowledged that responsible protest is an ideal scenario, though she remained cautious about how often that ideal is realized in practice. Jasmine responded by suggesting practical solutions that integrate both perspectives. She proposed community engagement programs, clear guidelines for demonstrations, and dialogue platforms where citizens could coordinate with local authorities. These measures could minimize risk while preserving the essential right to protest. By offering solutions rather than mere argument, Jasmine transformed the discussion from conflict into collaboration. The emotional layer also played a key role in the conclusion. Jasmine reminded the audience that behind every protest is a human story: a parent advocating for safer streets, a student raising their voice for climate action, or a community demanding fair treatment. At the same time, she acknowledged the emotional toll on residents and business owners, highlighting that empathy must extend to all parties involved. By situating the debate within lived experiences, Jasmine emphasized that policy decisions should be informed by human impact as much as by legal principles. The room responded with attentive nods, reflecting a deeper understanding of the stakes involved. Jasmine reinforced the historical context once more, explaining that many of the freedoms society enjoys today were won through protest and civil action. Suppressing or over-regulating protests risks stifling social progress and marginalizing voices that need to be heard. Yet she coupled this with Greene's concern for safety, showing that history also teaches the value of structure, accountability, and respect for communities. By blending historical insight with practical guidance, Jasmine provided a balanced narrative that lighted both principles and realities. The discussion then turned toward the role of perception and education. Jasmine pointed out that media coverage often emphasizes extreme incidents while overlooking peaceful, constructive demonstrations. She encouraged the audience to critically evaluate information, to discern patterns from anomalies, and to approach debates about public policy with informed understanding rather than reactionary fear. Greene, while emphasizing caution, appeared receptive to the idea that perception can distort reality and that policy decisions must consider context and nuance. The dialogue was no longer adversarial, but reflective, showing the audience how constructive discourse can bridge opposing viewpoints. To close, Jasmine focused on the future. She highlighted that society must continue finding ways to protect rights while maintaining safety. That dialogue between stakeholders is essential, and that empathy and responsibility must guide civic engagement. She suggested that citizens, lawmakers, and authorities share a collective responsibility to design systems that honor both freedom and security. This forward-looking perspective gave the debate purpose beyond argument, became a blueprint for practical civic action, encouraging thoughtful participation rather than polarization. The room, once tense with anticipation, now resonated with thoughtful engagement. Audience members appeared reflective, discussing the issues quietly among themselves, considering how rights, responsibilities, and human impact intersect in their own communities. The debate had evolved from a contest of ideas into a shared exploration of civic values, demonstrating that even contentious topics can be approached with balance, empathy, and clarity. By the end of Part 4, Jasmine Crockett had successfully synthesized the discussion. She respected Greene's emphasis on safety while firmly defending constitutional rights, framed human and historical contexts, provided practical solutions, and invited the audience into a reflective dialogue. The final moments of the debate underscored that constructive engagement, rather than victory or defeat, is the ultimate goal in any discussion about civic rights. The audience left with a richer understanding of protest, its importance, and the delicate balance required to protect both liberty and community well-being. The debate concluded not with applause or confrontation, but with reflection, understanding, and an appreciation for nuance. Jasmine's measured approach, integrating legal principles, emotional depth, practical solutions, and historical context, had shifted the momentum from contention to insight. Part 4 left the audience with the central lesson that freedom and responsibility are intertwined, and that thoughtful dialogue can reconcile even the most complex societal issues, creating a path forward that honors both rights and public safety.